Okay, let's get our renders to Photoshop. So this is one of the renders I got from Keyshot. There is no post work on it, and I'm gonna do some of the post work here right now. Even though the render I got from Keyshot looks pretty good already, I still want to do some of the post work on it. And basically it's gonna be the pass of this extra details my textures are missing. Since I didn't really paint any textures, I just used the material with some tileable maps. I'm gonna add some of the extra details right now, and I'm gonna start with the refining the edges and just gonna do a pass of the worn out edges. So it's pretty simple. It's just an extra overlay layer on top of my render, and I'm making a very simple brush with a little bit of the shape dynamics going on. So I just want to make sure I have a little bit of the fade while I'm drawing it, and I'm gonna use just a white color, and okay, that looks better. And I will just go on top of all the edges, which I think would be a little bit worn out during just the wearing of the suit, of the armor. So the cool thing about this is, since it's an overlay layer and I'm using just a white brush, if the detail, or if the image is in deep shadow, you won't really make any changes, which basically would make sense in terms of the lighting, because since the part of the mesh is already in the shadow, it wouldn't receive them a lot of light anyways. So you don't want to overlight the edges which are already pretty dark. It wouldn't look correct. And here what I'm doing is just kind of like make the edges a little bit more worn out, because if they will be a little bit more scratched and this kind of stuff, they would expose a little bit of more metal, or just more under material, so it get a little bit more specular in it. And I'm gonna apply it both to the metal, and also I'm gonna do a little bit on the rubber. So we can call this pass as like edge enhancement. And what I'm trying to do is not stay very consistent, but more of a like random, more of like random strokes, but I keep it along the edges. You can also like create some little scratches with this brush. So overall, it's very subtle. They don't really pop out a lot, but once the whole pass will be done, and you will turn it on and turn it off, and you will see the difference pretty big. So this is that kind of subtle details we always have in the real world, in the real life, but since our eyes got so used to that, we don't really pay attention to that. But it's such a major thing. When it's missing, you instantly see that the thing is artificial. It doesn't exist. It's too clean, And again, it depends on what kind of design you're doing. If you're making a product design, maybe the clean, perfect look is what you want to do. But here I want to make a little bit more, just to give it a little bit more character. And he's not perfect. He's using his suit. He's using his helmet, and it's clean enough, but it's not perfect, because nothing is perfect. Okay, adding a little bit more. Just crush this thing a little bit. Nothing too crazy, just some subtleness. Just trying to find all those edges which will get a little bit more scratched, just because they are exposed, or they are sharp enough. Just like if you take any metal metal thing, any metal piece of machinery, they usually get bumped out on the edges because it's more exposed. Adding an extra scratches thing. Scratches. Okay, maybe that's pretty much it. I'm playing a little bit with the radius of the brush. On the most tiniest edges, I'm trying to use a tinier brush with a smaller radius, so it won't go too heavy-handed. I want to keep the overall pass pretty subtle. Okay, we're almost there with the worn out edges pass. I think it looks much better. Okay. Yeah, I think this plate really needs a little bit more of this work. Okay. Maybe a little bit more on the suit. Make a brush radius a little bit bigger, so we can break up the specular a little bit more. The whole goal of doing that is to break up the specular a little bit, not just to pop up the edges, but to break up the specular. A perfect specular, this is what make the thing look artificial, and all those micro damages on the surface, this is what breaks the specular. So this is something you really want to have. Now I created an extra layer, and it's gonna be dirt pass, and filled it with a pure black color. I'm sorry, I black and inverted it to the white, so once it's in multiply, you don't see that. You don't see any impact on the layer beneath. So I'm picking the brush with some kind of like cross hatching stroke with which will work pretty well for that kind of dirt I want. Because the cool thing about this brush, it doesn't apply the dirty spots, it just have these lines, so even if I go pretty heavy-handed, it will still leave some of the transparency and some of the material beneath. So the overall dirt pass is really subtle. Really like it. Okay, let's flip the image, see how it looks from this angle. And we can add an extra dirt by using some of the images, some of the textures. So here I'm using some of the photograph textures and applying it to the overlay with tweaking the hue saturation a little bit more. I want to add this a little bit visible dirt look to the suit part, and I'm gonna use a mask. I'm gonna mask it out the area with the dirt. So my initial mask is black, so whatever I paint with white color, it's gonna make the dirt pop out, which is really handy on surfaces like that. Okay, I'm also mask it out on around that clip. Okay, overall looks pretty good. I'm copying this layer, and what I'm gonna do is to reduce the saturation and put it in multiply, and also I'm gonna blur it a little bit, just a little bit, so mixing it with that overlay layer beneath this one, it will have this kind of like almost an oily look and gonna increase the specular of it. And I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more so I can I'm just testing if I can actually to enhance some of the dirt paths a little bit more. Okay, I'm checking it with the turn on. Okay. Okay, we can mask out the tube here a little bit. Yeah, I'm picking the areas of interest. I don't want to get it too busy. Just some nice little dirt spots will be plenty. Okay, I think that works. Okay, let's test it with a little bit less opacity. Okay, maybe we can increase it just a little bit. Yeah, that's better. Okay, I'm zooming out just to check it out how the overall image looks. We can add a little bit more grunge on top of the helmet. Just add a little bit more dirt to it. It's too clean right now. Here I'm grouping my layers with dirt, just let's call it dirt. Yeah, I would strongly recommend to keeping your PSD's files organized. It's gonna really help you out if you'd like to do some changes, or if you just do keep working on some stuff for like days or weeks. You really want to have a strong understanding of what's going on in your PSD file, because sometimes it can get really complicated. Okay, so I'm adding a mask again. Using my start mask as a black one, I'm adding using the white brush, make the dirt get exposed in the areas I want. The same with what I did to the suit. Now we can just copy the dirt in the other parts of the suit. So again, I'm trying to keep it kind of subtle, because I was already pretty happy with the image. I just felt like it didn't really have the enough character and the surface detail going on. Okay, we can create a new layer and we can call it like enhancement of the highlights. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a gradient with the color dodge, and I'm gonna turn off these guys right here in the blend mode. So once I use the color dodge, it's gonna enhance. Oh yeah, that's right. So yeah, it's gonna enhance my highlights even more. So I can really have this nice contrast between dark areas and the bright areas. Because right now the whole image is pretty dark and the whole lighting is pretty dramatic. And in order to balance out these dark areas, I want to get some of the areas a little bit more overexposed, just so it has a little bit more, just nicer visual interest. So it's also good for enhancing the edges visibility, sorry. So just to, you see what areas, you just check for what areas you'd like to have to pop out a little bit more. You can create an extra layer and let's call it like a small lighting enhancement, and we can add a more minor color dodge spots, and since it's going to be in two separate layers, it will be easier to control them in separate way in case we'd like to get back and reduce some of the specularity. Here's also a great opportunity to enhance some of the edges even more, to give some extra specularity and to break up just some of the surface specularity as well. Okay, so overall it gets more alive. It doesn't look as boring. Okay, maybe we can add an extra light spot right here. Yeah, this process is pretty intuitive. It just depends on the taste and what kind of feel of the image you want to get. Because in this render, I wasn't really worried about getting my design exposed. I was more about the dramatic feeling, and I just wanted to have it dark and high contrasted in the highlight areas. So I'm just trying just to, just very intuitively follow this feeling, just to get to the point when I feel it looks correct. Here's how you can add some of the decals. Again, just put in an overlay and find the spot for that. I painted this decal in a separate document, just using some of the text, just random text, and then I cut some of the parts of the text so you can really read it, so that will look kind of like alienish language, and then added some symbol to it. Also, I just used the wrap, using it, just transforming the decal to make it wrap on the surface a little better, just to give it the 3D dimensionality a little bit more. Okay, I think that looks much better. Yeah, the placement for the decals and the way how it, if you do it in 2D comp work, it's really important, because if it won't wrap around the surface correct, it's gonna break the whole image. So you really want to make sure it will be wrapped correctly. Okay, so this is the trick I'm using to enhance my decals. I'm making a high pass filter on the copy of it and put it on the overlay. So the high pass overlay, and it enhances the edges around it, basically just making a contrast between the darker and the brighter values of it, and it makes it pop out a little bit more. Now I think the decal is a little bit too big, so I think I should just scale it down a little bit. But I have to select both of the layers, since one is the decal itself and the second is enhancement of decal's edges. Okay, I think that's better. A small nice decal with a barcode or whatsoever on the suit. Yeah, that works better. Maybe we can apply a sharpness filter on top of it. Since we scaled it down, we killed some of the information of the decal. So just sharpen a little bit. That will help to bring this small details back. Okay, now let's play with the curves. I really like to use the curves in the finalizing the look of the image, just to kind of give it a little bit of the film feel. And what I'm gonna do is I want to get a little bit of the greenish and the lower values. So I want to keep my highlights the same color. So playing with the lower parts of the curves, you can apply to the darker values of your image, and you can right now I'm using the green channel. So adding a little bit extra point of controls on the curves, you can design in such a way when it has a really short range of that green curve. And I'm keeping it really subtle. So you see it just popped out in the shadow area a little bit more. You can see it on top of the hat and the suit. I think this is a little bit too much. So right now I'm playing with this placement of those points to make sure the dynamics of this green rise and the dark value is not as major. Okay, I think the overall it's pretty good. Yeah, I'm testing it by switching on and off the layer with the curve. You can easily see there is a little bit of the green in the gradient on background. Okay, maybe we can add an extra layer control with the hue saturation and a mask. So what I'm gonna do is I want to desaturate the background a little bit. So I'm gonna use the mask. I'm gonna paint on the mask where I wanted to have it desaturated. Okay, I think that's better. So I still have the green tint in my shadow, the green from the background gone. I think it looks much better. So here you can see an extra pass with the blurred version of the initial render. And what it's gonna do, I'm gonna apply it as an extra bloom effect on my specular. I figure since I have some of the bloom effect going on the lights, on the blue lights, I can add a little bit of bloom and extra on the other parts with the highlights. Okay, I think that should work. Let's just play with the opacity and the blending mode. Okay, maybe we can enhance this one a little bit too. Alright. Yeah, that should be enough. Yeah, that should be enough. Let's just put it on the blending mode, and playing with opacity we can find that value when it really helps to enhance the highlights, but stays pretty subtle. We don't want to kill the details, we just want to enhance the highlights just a little bit to make it just a little bit more fancy. Okay, playing with opacity. Yeah, I'm always, when I'm working with layers, I'm always switching, turning on and turning off layers, and I'm checking the difference. And while I'm doing that, my eye basically goes through different areas and to see what's the advantage or what's the disadvantage of my change. Now let me just make a new document, and I'm gonna make I set a resolution for this image just right so I can fit the recording dimension of the video I'm recording right now, just so you guys can see that in the full detail. Also, all the time I'm changing the resolution, I'm down raising the image, I'm applying the unsharp masks to it. And the smaller image, the smaller radius. So like for an image like that, I'm using like 0.5 the radius of the sharpness. Here's the final gray shader render. I did this so we can see the design a little better and all these details. I also did a couple of versions of different a different metal shader, and it's I'm gonna show you in a second. Like this is one of the side view shader, and overall it's very similar, but there are some subtle changes in the metal. So it's basically kind of like a small of look depth for the metal itself. And I also did with a more kind of like thicker looking metal. It's a little bit more chunky, a little bit more heavy-handed. and also this image is good for showing some of the close-up details of the face. And this one's very, in terms of the camera angle, is very similar to the very first image we did, but it doesn't have as dramatic lighting, so we see the design and details a little bit better. So that's pretty much it for today, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it was fun and you picked up some tricks and techniques. Thanks a lot.